Neighbor tells you about the unstable man in the cul-de-sac who claims to have been abducted by aliens. Then there's the woman in town who claims to see Bigfoot all the time. Your boss, who you greatly admire, confides in you that he has started speaking with his wife daily when he gets home from work. She died 8 years ago. It's hard to believe this stuff, and you write these stories off as overactive imaginations. Are these people seeking attention, or are they a bit unstable? No matter what you think, if you're like me, you walk away wondering, what if that was true? The What If It's True podcast features stories by ordinary people like you and me. Something has happened to them, something so strange they are in agony unless they tell others. My name is Cameron Buckner, and the What If It's True podcast is available at whatifitstruepodcast.com and on all available podcast apps.
Welcome to Beast TV. What was that? You better get a fresh dip and buckle up. Larry Porch, how you doing tonight? Can you hear me?
I don't know.
You're making
My internet might be messing up again.
Uh-oh. Well, I think you're faking it.
I'm not. I don't know why it does it.
Oh, so you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just going, I don't know. Anyway, here we are.
Yeah, and we want to welcome everyone that's in chat. We got, good grief, we almost got 100 people already in chat.
You look like you're in a Kung Fu movie. Am I in a Kung Fu movie?
No, Grasshopper.
Well, your mouth is moving and then your words come across. I'm going to quit looking at you.
Okay. That would be advisable.
Yeah.
But we want to welcome everybody that's in our chat and watching. If you're watching this after the live broadcast, then we want to welcome you, and we thank you for your time to click on the thumbnail and watch our podcast. We've got a great guest on tonight, and it's getting close to Christmas. Larry, have you got all your presents bought, or are you just passing out money?
Passing out money.
Can't hide it.
But you can give it away.
Yeah.
And it's a whole lot easier than fighting people at the mall.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't even think about going to the mall.
I don't like shopping.
You're the guy that pulls up in those reserved parking spaces at the grocery store and let them bring it out to you.
That's correct, sir. I don't like it. Not at all.
I park in them, but I go inside and get what I want. I just don't want to have to park all the way down at the end of the lot where the gas pumps are and walk all the way up there.
You got to get you one of those blue cards to hang on your mirror.
Oh, you don't think they're going to tow me, do you?
No, not if you get one of those cards. You can park right up front.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you're disabled somehow.
Well, I am. And some people might argue mentally.
I hear you. Me too.
But we got a great show tonight. I love to hear encounter stories. I love to see evidence from the field and people that go out into the woods looking for these creatures. I think that we have a lot that we can learn from them. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest, Larry.
All right. Our guest tonight is Mr. Phillip Polk Palmer, all the way from Georgia.
Hello, guys.
How you doing tonight, Phillip?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing?
Doing fantastic.
Good. Glad to hear it. Glad to be here. I appreciate the chance to join y'all on this show.
Yes, sir. We're glad to have you, and we're eager to learn from you.
Well, and likewise, I know we talked earlier, but I know these guys got a lot of experience under their belts too.
Well, we try.
And probably, I got to say right off the bat, I now remember hearing that intro because I've watched some of y'all's shows in the past. And I'm not lying. My first thought was, I have got to contact that guy and see if we can collaborate, because that is an awesome piece of music. And there's definitely, to me, there's a Blue Oyster Cult kind of vibe going on in there, and a few other things too that I really like. So awesome.
Well, if to tell on myself, I used a 3-string cigar box.
Cool. That's even better.
And did that intro in about 45 seconds.
That's even better. There are no rules, and a lot of times when I'm recording a part that would typically seem like it should be an electric guitar, I'll say, the low 3 strings on an acoustic here would actually sound good with some distortion on them. And, there are no rules. And you think like that, that's great. Now, the outro's got a lot to live up to. I will tell you that. So.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, before we get into the Bigfoot topic, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Okay, that's fine. As they introduced me, I'm Phillip Palmer. Phillip Polk. I go by Phillip Polk Palmer mostly these days. From the land of the 3 named people. And I was born a twin to a very large, convoluted family. And one of my sisters, who's probably watching right now, might dispute this. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure. So let me point it out, so that my mother was married to a man and had a son and 3 daughters. My father was married to a woman and had 3 daughters. They divorced those people, married each other, and had me and my twin brother. But there was a point where all of those people lived together, all of us. A very brief period. But then after that, it was me, my twin, and my mom's kids from her marriage. So it was still a very large family under one roof. Granted, my twin brother and I were a good bit younger than the rest of our siblings. So eventually they all went out to, get married or go to college or whatever. My father was a professional musician and composer. At the time when I was born, my mother was a singer in his bands and orchestras, and they spent a lot of time on the road. So a lot of time was spent by my older siblings, watching over me and Kent. I think I may have mentioned to you, Mark, that, not to get deep down into all that, we all have our versions of dysfunction in families. But my version, for whatever reason, I think somehow connected me to the unusual, or who knows, maybe that's just genetic. My father was definitely interested in that. When I would look on the bookshelves, he had books on UFOs, and the very first book I ever read on Bigfoot, which was about the Sierra Nevada stories from the 70s, Ron Moorhead and all that was on the bookshelf. And so there was an interesting childhood, but I kind of grew up this really frightful would be the better word, child. I was very scared of ghosts, very aware of what I thought was their presence. And give you an example of, like, one night, for some reason I was sleeping on a cot, may have been 5 or 6 years old. And I was having this nightmare that a wolf man was trying to beat down the front door downstairs. And when I woke up, my mom and dad were coming in the door in a screaming match with each other. They'd just gotten off the road from a show, like 3 a.m. And I think a lot of that kind of painted my views in life. I was very interested in the paranormal, and not just the paranormal, but the things that are unrecognized, even if they're not paranormal in our life. And you know, I was up every weekend watching the old horror flicks like the original Frankenstein and all that stuff, these double feature things. Or there was one thing that would come on for like 4-6 hours of just horror movies every night, and I would stay up on the weekends and watch that stuff. And my, you know, for all of the lackings that my parents had, one thing they seemed to recognize in me was that aspect of me, and they were buying me books on the macabre and the paranormal by the time I was 8 or 9 years old. I mean, they divorced when I was 9, but you know, Dad was still in my life to some degree, you know, after that. And you know, I'd already, you know, I was in the 1970s. I knew about spontaneous human combustion, all kind of fascinating things, UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts. I remember this one particular story about a crane with a giant, you know, what they call a headache, a wrecking ball on it. I can't remember the weight of the ball. It was obviously immense. The workers got done from work, went home, came to work the next morning, the ball was gone, just gone. Like, what is that about, right? So that's just that. To me, it was like, okay, well, there's this other aspect of life, the kind of mundane that we all have to do. But for me, it was those things, be they true or not, but possibly so, that really intrigued me from a very early age. And as far as my interests, you know, I love cooking. I spent a lot of my life earning a living in kitchens. I like creating food. I have a hot sauce line. I have a hot sauce company. I was going to use the name Sauce Squatch, but believe it or not, another company that has hot sauces, but not a sauce called Sauce Squatch, bought the domain name for that and is just sitting on it. Pretty clever. I'm a musician and a songwriter, and that's a big part of my life. And my wife and my child are the biggest parts of my life. As I stated, you know, we kind of a late bloomer. I'm 55 with a 6-year-old child, and he's the love of our life. And I think it's made changes in us way for the better, you know, just to see the magic of this little imaginative child. And so that's, you know, that's a good overview of me without getting too long-winded. Yeah.
Well, Phillip, you like to cook and like to play music, and I'm kind of the polar opposite. I like to eat and I can't play music.
That's funny. My mom had a good friend who loved my mom. Mama, I got my cooking from my mom.
Yeah.
And my mom's friend, this was like her daughter from another family. She was just over at the house all the time. She said, "I'm not a gourmet cook. I'm a gourmet eater."
Me too.
Yeah.
That's my calling in life, right?
You know, honestly, when I put on like a dinner party or whatever, still, it just brings me pleasure. I want to make sure everybody else is happy. That really does bring pleasure to me. Yeah. You know, obviously there's pressure when, you know, like working in the kitchen, even if it's home and you're cooking for 10 people, there's all this pressure, but you kind of feed off of it at the same time. And then you want to make sure everything's going as well as it can be and everybody's enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
That's where the payoff is. For me, it's not, I love eating it too. Don't get me wrong. I got to drop a few pounds, but you know,
me too.
Story for another time.
Now, normally here's where I ask, how did you get interested in Bigfoot? But you answered that. You said through your father buying you books and your mother buying you books. So
well, it goes a little deeper than that, actually. Before they bought me the books, before those books were purchased, we went to a movie, and I still remember the movie. It was a Robert Redford movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And it was about a pilot, I think, who had been a fighter pilot in World War I and somehow didn't get to perform the way he wanted to. I mean, it's been so long, I don't know exactly. But back then, you know, it wasn't all just 30-minute trailers for other movies that are on playing at 120 decibels and about to destroy your brain. They did do trailers for movies, but they also did cartoons like Mr. Magoo. I'm showing my age, but I already said that. They did shorts. They did film shorts. And this movie, before the movie came on, there was a short about Bigfoot. And I can tell you this, I do remember seeing the Patterson footage in the film. And I remember hearing some vocalizations. Some of them might have been similar to like the Ohio howl. That's me now knowing the Ohio howl and attaching it to that. It may not have been. Once again, long time ago. But I just remember thinking, of course, back then, the whole idea was that this was a thing that inhabited the Pacific Northwest and Canada. But I remember while I'm watching this like 15-minute, 20-minute documentary, well, we have mountains here in Georgia. Maybe they're there. It just really grabbed me. It was scaring me, but making me curious at the same time. Everything's kind of pitted in a monster kind of way a lot of times. And I want to touch on that too, about the whole idea of whether this entity is negative, positive, all points in between. That's definitely something that is a big subject of debate, and I would like to touch on it at some point. So that's it. That was really the genesis.
Yeah.
Was that short film.
Tell us about your sighting. This is what I would really want to hear. Is what happened to you.
Okay. This was in 1995. There were a few years. I was living in Athens, Georgia. I moved up to Athens, Georgia in 89 and basically stayed there for 10 years. And when I was younger, I had a big group of friends as a teenager, like we all do, and I was interested in dating and all that. But I also had a part of me back then was much more of a kind of loner. And as I moved into my early to mid 20s, I felt this need for this kind of male bonding connection. And I made all these friends up in Athens. And most of these people, interestingly, weren't from Athens. They were from Macon, Georgia. And it was male and female friends. But there was, I remember going to Okefenokee as a kid several times and loving it because I have this thing about alligators and all crocodilians. That's another huge interest of mine. And just the beauty of that swamp. You're not going to run into a billboard that's advertising a 7-Eleven once you're inside there. No power lines, nothing. It's primordial. It's just like it is up in the mountains once you get away from the stores and all that. But in a different way, it's a different kind of beauty. To me, it's a beauty where decay actually gets a say in beauty. These decayed trees and this just dripping Spanish moss and the black water. Everything seems to be about slowness and decay somehow. And it's really beautiful. And so I just had this brainstorm, like, we're going to get these guys. I'm going to get a bunch of us, I'm going to get my twin brother who's down in Savannah still, get him to round up some of his redneck buddies and all my friends that were up there in Athens. And we're going to go down. We're going to get 10 of us or so and go down and, try to fish, but bring a bunch of burger meat because I know we're going to fail at that. So we have something to eat at night. And, just hang out in the camp, get out in the boats, go out of the water, see the sights, try some fishing. And I was so excited that I got everybody psyched up about this. And they were kind of like, this has to happen now. If you don't pull through on this, we're going to be really disappointed. And we did this for several years. I think this was the second go round in 95. And I was living with my then girlfriend, who is my wife now. And we had a roommate. And he went, named Bob, and he went down with us. So we get down there. We're, immediately everybody's having a great time. We get settled in. We get our tent set up and all that stuff. And I can't remember if it was the first I think we were there for 3 days, and I can't remember if it was the first day or the second day. I think it was the second day because we got there kind of late on the first day. I guess Okefenokee was probably a good 6 hour drive from Athens, Georgia. It's near the bottom of. It's Stephen Foster State Park, which is near the bottom of Georgia. At this point, Bigfoot's not on my radar at all. Like, you know, I had that interest as a kid, including all the other things. But, you know, I moved out of that for a while. I got to be a teenager like all of us and was into having fun with the kids, the friends, and meeting girls and all that stuff. And then into my 20s, I moved up to Athens for music is what I did. I didn't go up there for college. But I got back to work in kitchens up there. So I believe it was the second day, and we all went out on canoes. The game plan was, let's go up in canoes and kind of really just quietly explore this environment. And if you want to go up deeper, the next day we'll take the little motorboats. They had these little John boats with literally 5-6 horsepower motors on them. So the first day, do the canoes. So Bob, my roommate, went up a canoe, and I don't know if you all are familiar with that area at all, but from that southern part of the swamp, the main body of water is called Billy's Lake, and it's a pretty long lake, and it's not really wide. Like, I'd have to go back and look at it on Google, but you know, it's never like a mile wide. It might be a couple hundred yards at the most, probably. But that's the main big body of water. And then there's just all these tributaries. Now, there are other lakes up there, but in that bottom section, that's the biggest one. And there are all these tributaries off of the lakes. And so we had gone east onto Billy's Lake and probably down a half a mile, maybe a little bit more, and then hung a left up a tributary that just got more and more narrow. And of course, I've got my eyes out for alligators. Just something I love looking at. You know, Bob was a little nervous about the alligators. You know, like, if you don't mess with them, you're fine. You know, I don't know how far up we went, but we went up a good ways, and eventually made the decision to turn around and come back, see if we could meet up with some of the other guys, because we all went in our own direction that day, or at least some of us did. I think some of the guys kind of grouped off together. I mean, there was at least 10 of us. And we were coming really close to Billy's Lake again, where we would then, of course, have to hang a right. And all of a sudden, as we're paddling, and I'm the guy in the back, Bob's in the front, we hear a commotion to our right in the thicket, right off. So there's all this like cypress nubs, cypress stumps and all that, and then all kind of thicket and what's that? I think it's we've got it out here, Yopon holly and all that stuff. And we're hearing a commotion that's like at the water's edge, and it's obviously something big. So my first thought is maybe that's an alligator that's up near the bank and I can't see it. And then my mind just started going through all the possibilities. So that was alligator, bear, hog, deer. For some reason, as we continue to get closer and closer to this, when I say closer, I mean, if it's up here, well, let's do this way. If it's up here and we're coming down, but we were probably 40 feet distant from the banks of that section. And still not seeing anything, and I'm a little bit bewildered that I see some movement of some, but not seeing a thing. And as we get almost just kind of perpendicular to it, we see this figure rise up, and at the same time turn around with its back towards us. So if I did like this, and as I'm going up, I did like this, and what quickly became apparent was this thing was standing on 2 feet, was apparently down low, and was standing on 2 feet, and rose up and turned around as it rose. The immediate message I got was, we disturbed this thing, whatever it was, and have wanted nothing to do with us. I don't know if it was looking for food in the water's edge or getting a drink of water. I don't know. But I can tell you, I could not see the waist or the hip area. I should be more, the hip, but I could see a fair portion of the back of this animal and the shoulders, and I didn't get a good look at what would be the head or face or whatever you want to call it because of how quickly it turned. But there are some things that I can use to describe what I remember. Are y'all familiar with the Melissa Hovey photograph from Georgia?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if that's real or not. If it's a hoax, it's an excellent hoax. Like that is a well done, and it could be. I mean, no. That's basically turned around what I saw. I saw a fairly domed head, the whole sloped shoulders, like even more so than Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the head's planted on there. So many people describe this. It wasn't, I don't know how tall it was. That's hard for me to say. I don't think I saw an 8-foot hulking beast. At a guess from memory, 6.5 feet tall, but powerfully built. And when I say powerfully, I don't mean super bulky either, just muscular and ropey and kind of a grayish hair with some degree of brown and other colors in there, a little bit dark, darker than brown. Like that Melissa Hovey picture, it wasn't as hair covered as, some of these descriptions. You could see some of the flesh underneath the hair. But the thing for me that was the weirdest was there was obviously a lot of commotion when we first saw this. How fluidly it then got up and moved away. It still had to move through some water to get, because those swampy areas, they don't just suddenly recede like a beach to nothing. The water just lingers on into those cypress knobs and stuff.
Yeah.
But the locomotion that I could see from the top, because I couldn't see the legs, was so fluid. There was not all this ungainly up and down. It reminded me of a woman that used to run in my neighborhood when I was a teenager. She was the most hilarious thing. She wore a long skirt and tennis shoes and like a dress shirt, but she jogged. But the way she jogged, she looked like, especially because of that long dress, to her jog, when she ran, there wasn't this up and down motion. She literally looked like this apparition just floating down the street in a dress with tennis shoes. And in a way, it reminded me of that simply because it was just so fluid. It was like it was floating away, even though I know it wasn't. And the sound just dissipated so quickly. And then it was gone. I mean, it's thick in there. This was in the warmer months. So, we're not talking about bare trees or any of that. It was. And as I told you earlier when we talked, Bob and I were, what the F was that? Sorry. I won't bring the expletive in, but we were literally saying that over and over again. And just in disbelief and looking at each other and looking in there, and then what do we need to do? And I didn't even think, let's get out of here. Honestly, I didn't feel any sense of threat. Not only was it leaving, we were in a boat. Not that I guess it could come back in the water and come turn us over, but it was walking away. Like I said, had it been a bear or if it was or whatever, it didn't want anything to do with us. But just this utter shock of so it brought back to me the memory I had of my earlier interest in this subject and always wondering and not knowing, but wondering. And all of a sudden for me in that moment, there was a combination of, oh no, there's no more wondering. That's just been taken away from me. I can't even ponder this anymore. Combined with, weirdly, did that really just happen? Did that really just happen? Or, Bob and I discussed this on the way back paddling as we decided it was, we had no choice but to just keep moving. It was gone. And then we talked about the practical aspect of, do we bring this up back at camp? I came up with an emphatic no. this crew we hung up, but they were great guys. But you know how it is to get with a group of people that, you know, they're like piranha looking for that little bit of blood, even in their own. You know, if they see some weakness, they're going to have a laugh on you. They're going to. So that was off. We decided we're not bringing this up. And the weirdest thing was carrying this with us for the rest of the trip. Excuse me, I'm hearing footsteps. I don't think it's Bigfoot though. But hearing, you know, thinking about this and then trying to just assimilate back into the good times we were having with this thing on my mind, and I'm sure on his mind. And I especially say for Bob's mind, because Bob, I don't think, based on just talking with him as a roommate about things over the period we lived together, that anything of that nature was ever something that was on his radar at all. So as much as I was overwhelmed, I think he was doubly overwhelmed. I don't know, but we didn't bring it up with them. We rode together in the car going back home. And I wanted to bring it back up. Look, I'm like, let's dissect this thing. I could pick up the dot. Bob was not open to talking about it. And I wanted to, as much as I wanted to talk about it, I wanted to respect where he was. And we never talked about it again. And I don't know much. Bob, I think, we may have been roommates another year or so. But it never came up again. And then eventually, of course, I moved away from Athens almost in 99, 98. And I never saw or heard from Bob again. And I did try to seek him out. Shit, not even based on that. I was like, where's my old buddy Bob Kitcube? I would give his last name. Where's my old buddy Bob? I'm going to look him up on social media. And I couldn't find him. You know, he's probably smart, unlike me. He's not all over social media. So, yeah, it took away from me the question. And I remember having a friend tell me when I was discussing something with him. And he said to me, Phillip, you just like the mystery. You really don't want the answers. And I don't know if he was right or not, but I know in that moment that was no longer an option. Like what I could say is when it comes to the subject of Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call it, I don't know how real I am. I know there's all this quantum science coming out saying we're basically made of nothing, and you know everything is space, and it's it's collapsed particles that we're interpreting and what. But I can say that it is real. It is as real as I am, whatever that is. It's in this experience somewhere, and I had to stuff that down. No, I had to stuff it down. He wouldn't talk about it. And once again, I got on with the business of life. So that was pretty much it.
Would you consider this an animal, what you saw?
Well, I'll be honest with you. At that point, I didn't know. Like, I think there was a part of me that thought, well, it's an animal. Maybe it's some kind of primate, like people said. But I did have it in my mind that this, even though I didn't feel a threat at that point, that this could be something that I wouldn't want to get too close to. But, you know, that's true of bears, you know, alligators. You know, I've done some pretty dumb things getting up close to alligators, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know at that point, but my view has been pretty altered over the course of between then and now. So it seemed animal-like. It seemed primordial. It really did. Just the overt musculature of this thing, the fluidity of its motion, like it was built for the environment. It wasn't, you know, like when we go into the ocean or in the woods, I mean, we're the most adaptable being, I guess. We're like the jack of all trades with it, in my view, but we're not really great at any of them. I've heard stories of porpoises literally trying to push people away from an area where sharks are because we're so ungainly and we're splashing around.
Yeah.
This being that I now consider it a being, I will use the word being, was built for its environment. It was designed to be the environment. And even if you didn't believe in anything paranormal about Sasquatch at all, its ability to be in the environment makes it appear that way at the very least. It's insane, you know. I couldn't believe it. Like it wouldn't have been something I'd ever even thought about. How do we look when we're walking or moving through the woods?
Yeah.
And when I saw this, it just light bulb. Wow, look at that. It's just basically moving fluidly, not up and down into the woods and disappearing. And somehow that sound factor too going down, really, there had to be a lot of water to splash in. So I don't know, but I think we ticked it off, but it didn't get ticked off and get aggressive. It's like, you guys messed up a meal. And I wonder about how much that happens. How many times do we screw up I know they probably have a wide menu, everything from acorns to bark to whatever. But I mean, I think the deer thing and the hog thing's pretty well established. How many times have we screwed up a hunt? You know what I mean? Not knowing it.
Yeah.
Just running through the woods, having a good time. That could get pretty annoying.
Yeah. How long do you think this sighting happened?
Okay, from
Seconds.
the time that let me think about it. Let me honestly give this some thought. So from the time we first heard the noise, I would guess that up ahead on our right, on the land or at the bank area, was the time that we got. I don't know if I got in tune with it first or he did. We would probably be, say, like I said, if we were perpendicular to it, but before we came up to being perpendicular to that area, was maybe 80 feet away. And that's a guess, but I think it's a fair guess. And, just a light paddling on the canoe, probably moving 2 miles an hour, something like that. From the time that we saw this thing stand up and walk into the woods, that was all of 30 seconds, maybe 20 at the most. And then our freaking out was another 2-3 minutes in the boat, not deciding whether we need to get out of here. What do we do? So, I'd say all from first hearing it, maybe the brunt of the time was freaking out. The experience was probably under a minute completely, And even that didn't include sighting the whole time. A lot of that was audio as we moved up to the area. So from the sighting itself, like I said, maybe 20 to 30 seconds at a guess. Being 26 years ago, though, I'm like, how much has my memory re-edited things to fit my current, I don't know. I have a habit of over philosophizing things at times and questioning things. And I've reiterated over and over again because I've had so many people go, no, that thing you thought happened, either that didn't happen that way or that never happened. That's why I'd love to talk to Bob, but I know it's not a total false memory. Something happened.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember happened.
Well, it's funny how your mind can play tricks on you too.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, I know Shelley Reed was in a truck with Larry Porch when she had her daylight sighting.
Okay.
And she's not the only person that I know that has done this, but they try to talk themselves out of what they actually saw.
Right.
Because you're living in a world where, all of a sudden you see a monster and it's like, surely I didn't just see what I saw, and and it takes days for it to actually soak in and to realize what you actually did see out there.
That's absolutely right. It makes you question everything. That one thing, because it's so outside of your worldview at the time, it makes you go, what do I even know? What do I know?
Yeah.
And at the moment, it's just, I think for a lot of people, they can't process it. So like you said, they talk it down. They rationalize it. That was, I'm always reminded of the UFO skeptic, Phillip Class. Everything was swamp gas, basically. And I'm not even in this story here. This podcast, I'm not purporting what I know about UFOs at all. It could be completely human for all I know. But to dismiss it all as like tricks of light and swamp gas is pretty absurd. You know,
Yeah.
It's a person in denial themselves that we don't know what we think we know. We know a lot, or we've learned a lot, but there's always an endless ocean of stuff. And a lot of times what you've learned in the past only serves as a stepping stone to get you to the next point. And then that information that you learned becomes meaningless. Its real goal was just to get you to the next point. It wasn't actually truth. It was just to jump you off to the next level, in my view.
Yeah.
Because that continually happens with me. Like I'll think I'm locked in now. I got a bead on this. And then something new comes along. And it's because of that earlier information that I was exposed to it. But that earlier information now is like a wisp of smoke.
You know, that's one thing that all of our inner circle loop friends,
Amazing.
we all say that the more we learn, the more we realize that how much we don't know and the more questions we have.
Exactly. Each new answer just breeds 1,000 more questions.
Yep.
It's really true. That is definitely true. And it's great. It's an exciting thing. That I think my friend was right. I just love the mystery because there's always more mystery to get to, you know. On that note, one time, this is just a little anecdotal humor. My mom was pressing me as a teenager for what I was going to do with my life. And I had no clue. But one thing I really did love is I always loved murder novels and, private detective stuff. I said, well, I've been thinking about becoming a private detective. And she goes, Phillip, you couldn't even find your own keys. And she's right. But I do love a mystery, you know. It's just probably not solving crimes wouldn't be the best. But, you know, you always hear about the whole thing with good detectives, whether they're police detectives or otherwise, trusting that intuitive side of them. It's not false. They really do. And we've been raised in this society not to trust our gut. Yeah. And I'm not saying our gut can always be right. I've always had a country lyric I wanted to put in a song, and that was, I trusted my gut, and my gut was wrong. If anybody can do anything with that, please take it. But and I think I talked a little about that with you as regards to this subject that we're on tonight, like in terms of where to go and where to look. And I've relied a lot on intuition, and it's not always been right, but a lot of times it has really paid off. Now, I've never had an experience like that again, which was just directly visual and audio, but I've had other things that on other levels are deeper than that, even though they don't involve a 40-foot sighting of something that I can't explain. You know, they involve communications that I've had via tree knocks and glyph exchanges where they're altering the glyph that I made, or, you know, just crazy stuff that I'm like, once again, I'm all back at, is this really happening all over again?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, share with us some of your interactions that you have had out in the field.
Should I do it chronologically?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, this seems to make the most sense to me. So, I'll see if I can make this as concise as possible, because I would be just rambling for hours. Not that I have hours necessarily of experience, but my tendency to, as I state, kind of over verbalize what's going on with me. But I told you, I got reinterested again. So there's 3 different points in my life with this thing. There was the movie with the trailer, and then subsequently my parents buying me books on things like that, and then the sighting, and then the third reentry into this subject was, and I told you, the Rick Dyer hoaxes. My brother called me up because he knew of my interest, my twin brother. You got to get on the news right now. There's been a Bigfoot, found in Georgia, and they've got it in a box of ice and all of that. And me, obviously, like Mulder, I want to believe, the skeptic screaming at me already, like, okay, I'll be open and look at it. And I got really interested. So that was 2008, if I recall. And I was fascinated with Rick Dyer himself as a personality and how this guy could seemingly just gather up such a group of followers who could justify over and over again each, because he at least pulled off three more hoaxes, including a traveling fake Bigfoot similar to the Minnesota Iceman, which in my view, the original Minnesota Iceman was a real thing.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. Touring the malls and charging, But anyway, that's kind of peripheral. So that got me back into it, though. And so I had befriended somebody that I was in grade school with. She connected with me in like 2009 on Facebook. And we became great friends again. And that was kind of a miracle because I wasn't really the friendliest dude. I was a kid. I'd pick on her lunch, what she was eating for lunch and all that stuff, and we it was amazing how just forgiving this person was about what a jerk I was as a child, and we really hit it off and just became really best of friends. And I became friends with her husband and her children, and she and her husband and me and my wife decided to take a trip up to the Georgia mountains for a vacation. Now, unbeknownst really to my wife and to Larry, there was an ulterior motive, which was to go look for Bigfoot. My wife knew a little bit about it, of course, but we were also wanting to go up and have a good time. This area was a cabin. If you go, I don't remember the highway number, but if you're going through Helen, Georgia, and you're going west away from Helen in the direction of West Georgia. Right after you get out of Helen, there's a switchback highway called 356 that goes back kind of north, kind of east, northeast, the other direction. And I had measured it out later. We were about 7 miles from where that road turned back, if you wanted to do that instead of continuing on west. We got a cabin that was sat right off that highway 356. And the very next morning, we get there late at night. We had a rough time. Larry couldn't find where we were going in the rain, and we finally got there. And we get up the next morning. There's a note from Elizabeth. We're on our way to find a hospital. Larry is passing a stone as we speak. I'm like, oh my God. I called her. I'm like, where are you going? She said, well, there's only 2 hospitals, and the one I'm trying to remember the town near Helen. They were told, do not buy a gas station attendant, do not go there. That they have so many lawsuits against them. So they were headed to Gainesville, to the hospital there, which was a bigger drive, but a better hospital. So I was like, well, we got the day together. And I think we just kind of hung out and had a good time that day, hanging around the cabin. There was a river. It's called a river. It's more like a big stream called the Okefenokee River, loaded with trout. And I'm like, God, I wish I knew how to fish, mountain fish. I've fished in ponds and saltwater fishing, but I've never done any mountain stream fishing. And they come back later that day. He's bedridden the rest of the vacation, which, and this might sound bad because I love Larry, but it was actually the best thing because he would not be about getting into the woods and trekking and looking for stuff. He wouldn't be about it, at least not then, maybe now. But Elizabeth was, and Stacy was game too, my wife Stacy. So we, the next day after that, got out and we found an old logging road that was abandoned and started following that. So between the logging road was the mountain going up and the Okefenokee River. So I knew as long as we follow this logging road until it dissipates, as long as we've got the mountain on this side of us and the river on this side of us, we can't get lost. So we kept going, and eventually, I guess we probably went about a mile and a half in down the trail. The logging trail eventually dissipated, and we just kind of hung near the river. And I looked down on the sandbank, and there was a footprint in the sandbank. I'm like, look, guys, there's some kind of footprint right here. We got to go check this out. And we did. And what I can say, I don't think I didn't send you that video. I should have. I've got a video of that, but I didn't send that to you. But the sandbank was pretty, it was only a couple of feet wide before it got to the river. So it wasn't a huge sandbank. And because my assertion was that because of all the splashing, that sandbank stayed wet. It would have never been dry completely because there's just too much water splashing and stuff. And this foot track was about 12 inches long, maybe a little over 12. And I based that on putting my shoe up to it. It didn't have toe prints, but the whole thing is there was a lot of leaf litter or pieces of sticks and stuff also embedded in this. The key thing to me was, at the time, I weighed about 205 pounds. And I put my foot right next to that foot track, and I put all my weight and then some pushing into the ground. And I could only get my shoe in millimeters, a couple of millimeters. This thing was in close to a half inch. And it just didn't have the shape of what I would think is a shoe print. And there was no tracks, no heel and no tread. It was a smooth print. I do have it on video. I'll send it to you later. Totally forgot about that. Oh, I know why. It's in a hard drive in another computer I've got upstairs. It's all dismantled. I may have it somewhere on Facebook though. So if I have it on Facebook, I'll tag you. That was intriguing. That was like exciting for me. Like, hey, what is this? And then, not far off the bank, I found so there were a lot of these big stones and that kind of green moss that grows over the stones. Well, there was a particular stone where a flap of moss had been pulled off the rock. And I am kind of extrapolating and interpreting a bit here. But that flap was perfectly in the shape of a heel and half a foot. And it wasn't separated from the rock. It was just flapped over so you could see the rock and you could see that back foot shape. Like, in other words, the way I was thinking is a foot grabbed this rock and then as it moved, it pushed off a section of that moss, basically in the shape of the foot. So I went down to look at it closer, and sure enough, there was a blonde hair, probably 3 or 4 inches long in the, it was a pretty fine hair. Unfortunately, I remember putting it in a piece of paper that I folded up like a paper football, and when I got back home to Savannah, I put it in a book. It's never returned. Like, there's some book somewhere with a paper football with some blonde hair in it. That was about the extent of our experiences there, other than me leaving them occasionally going up a mountainside where I was trusting my intuition and getting a gut feeling that I was being watched. Now, that could have just been my innate fear at the time. I told you I came into all this stuff from a state of fear and have had to kind of grow through that. So moving on, the very next year, Stacy and I went back up to the mountains just with our dog, Douglas. And we went to Fort Mountain, Georgia, and there's a cabin area there on Highway 52 called Mountain View Cabins. And that was, we got there at night. I started unloading. The driveway went down the hill to the backyard of the house, pretty steep. And so I started unloading the car and walking up the back. I got Stacy to open up the back door, going up the back steps and unloading the luggage. I always did this stuff in cabins because this is going to sound chauvinist, and I don't mean it to be that way, but just my wife is one of the people who doesn't. She does occasionally do tent camping. I'd love to just get out with a bunch of people that want to do that. Maybe one day we can do that. That'd be awesome. But I'm like, there's no reason why we can't just go into a cabin and then go out in the woods and explore. So that was my mentality, and enjoy the comforts of a nice cabin. So we went into I'm jumping. I'm sorry, and I'm gonna stay jumped. We had already been to this place the year after our experience with our friends. We went to Wilderness View Cabins in 2014. I had a bunch of experiences there that furthered my belief. I don't know if I sent you a little picture of a triangle in a dirt road.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we'll look at that in a little bit.
We'll look at that later. So I'm going to bypass the whole 2014, John. We went back up to Mountain Wilderness View Cabins in 2017 to get away from a hurricane in Savannah. And we were actually trying to rent the same cabin. But when we got up there and I touched base with the people, the property manager, she said that, actually the hurricane, the tropical storm or hurricane, whatever it was, it already happened. But we were dealing with a power outage that was going on for a couple of weeks here in Savannah. Tempers were flaring. And my wife and I, and we were like, with our child, we're like, let's just go. We're going to go to the mountains and not deal with this. And we'll come back. And the storm had passed through North Georgia. And so when we got there and I touched base with the property manager, she said, because the road going to that cabin that we went down in 2014 is a very steep dirt road. She said it got washed out. She said, so would you be happy taking a different cabin? And I said, well, sure. I mean, what choice do I have? Let's take a different cabin. Well, it turns out the cabin they gave us, which was called Black Bear Cabin, was perfect. It was on a cul-de-sac where there were no other cabins. In the backyard was Cohutta Wilderness all the way up to Tennessee. There may be a few dirt roads in between, but it's just pure wilderness for miles. And this isn't a place that has hiking trails. And we were kind of in the off season. So even the other houses, there were some pretty palatial houses in here, in cabins. They were unoccupied. A lot of them were for sale. So we had the whole area to ourselves. So that's the place where I'm saying I was unloading down this steep driveway to the back of the house at night. I kept having this feeling of being watched again from the wood line. So the next day I get up, make breakfast. We all have breakfast. I go out to the backyard. I'd say the wood line was about 25 feet from the back of the house. I immediately start looking for anything I can see that seems out of the usual. And sure enough, I do. I find a large branch in a tree that does not belong to that tree. That tree had no branches that size. And there are no overhanging trees with branches that, that would have matched or could be. It was automatically kind of like a bell for me. So what I first did was I went into the wood line about 15 feet and I took 3 sticks there's some comedy here too, okay? I took 3 sticks about a foot long each and made a triangle on the ground. And then what I did was I took a snail shell and I placed it in the very middle of the triangle with the hole, the side the snail would come out of down, the back of the shell up. And then I took 2 more sticks and made what I would describe as an equal sign, one on the top of the snail straddling the triangle and one below the snail straddling the. If y'all can get an image of that in your head. Went back in the house. We decided to go, do some sightseeing and all that stuff. And the next day I checked it in the morning. It had not changed at all. But I started to also become more aware of other sticks and branches that were just really oddly placed in the area. So that afternoon, the second day, I decided to take Douglas on a walk to let him go do his business and just get some exercise. Douglas is about a 65-pound. If you Googled a Springer Spaniel with a Australian Shepherd, that would be pretty much. He was black and white. Beautiful dog, sweetest dog in the world. But like I said, he was definitely he had more bird dog in him than he had shepherd dog in him. But, I didn't use him as a hunting dog, but he pointed automatically. He would chase deer. He would dig up ground moles and loved all that stuff. And he loved the woods, even where we live here. He loved the woods. He loved getting into the woods and going finding creeks and jumping in day or night. So anyway, I take him on a walk. Stacy stays at the house with Elliot, who's very young. Elliot was very young at that point. And we go just a short ways down, and I'm looking down a ravine. And I'm one of these guys. Might be a jerky thing to do, I don't know, but I do tree knocks. Now, I used to automatically find myself doing 3 tree knocks. there's just something about the number 3. And I find I notice when I watch videos, a lot of other people do 3 tree knocks. But I had changed my tactic to just doing a lone tree knock, because the years before, when we were first up in those same cabins, that was the first time I heard a tree knock. I was up on the deck at 3 a.m. and my wife was asleep, and I just heard this lonely with a lot of reverb on it, because it was down in the ravine, maybe half a mile away. I don't know. So I'm looking down a ravine here, and I grab this big solid branch, and I just do a big loud pop. And the thing that came back just blew my mind. 3. I'm not saying it was, but it sounded like if the gods were taking a tree and knocking a tree. I couldn't believe it. And Douglas is looking all intently down into the ravine and all excited. And now I don't know if y'all do this, and forgive me if this sounds crazy, but because I don't know what these beings are, and I don't know if they understand anything about our language or not, but I suspect they might. I talk to the woods and I say, okay, I'm just letting you know, if that is you, I am here out of curiosity, and I mean no disrespect. And I got past the point of caring whether somebody else was walking around and thinking, God, that guy's a nut job. So I said, I'm going to give you one more tree knock, if that's okay. And I did. And I got 3 back again. So then I just basically said, okay, I think you're telling me you're here and you understand I'm here, and I don't know what else we're communicating, but I'm going to go back to the cabin now. And I said, just for reassurance, could you at least give me one more sign before I go? And I didn't hear anything. I waited for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And we started walking back to the cabin. And then I just got this big lone 1 tree knock. And my mind was blown. I was on a skeptic show. I was invited onto a skeptic show. This guy started becoming a member of a lot of Bigfoot pages. And he was basically trolling out Bigfoot people to get him on his show so that he could basically get a war going between people that accept this subject and people who don't. And it's not just Sasquatch, obviously. Anything where he can get a controversy stirred. And I like the guy. Don't get me wrong, I do like him. But I see what he does. And I saw him advertising on a Bigfoot Facebook page, and I accepted. I said, look, I'm willing to come on the show if you want. And I told him about these experiences. And when I told him that, he said, what if your wife knew how interested you were in Bigfoot, and she paid a guy to come up there and basically wait around and do that stuff for you? And I said, do you know how my wife is with money? Like, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, here's how this thing progresses. We go back into the cabin. I'm balancing family time. This isn't her thing, really, and I appreciate that. We're having a vacation. So I have to be respectful. I can't be just off out into the woods the whole time or any of that. Get back to the house. We're having family time, having a good time. And I decided to go back, though, into the backyard. And the triangle with the snail shell in the middle and the 2 pieces forming an equal sign straddling was now a triangle with a snail shell in the very top corner of the triangle with the whole side up. And the equal sign was now way down at the bottom, but still perfectly an equal sign. Now, I took pictures of this, of course. The whole thing is I could take pictures of all this, right? And I could be the one orchestrating all this. We know that. That's why pictures will never, they're for our own sake. I do like sharing them with fellow enthusiasts.
Uh-huh.
But we know that that's never going to, but my mind was like, I already had the tree knocks in response to my tree knock. And I'm like, oh my God. So I don't even know how to process this. I go back into the house with her, and I'm like, I'm not even going to say anything right now. I'll bring it up later. Let's just, have fun with Elliot. And we did. And that night, there was a kid's animation movie. I think it's called Ice Age.
Yeah.
All this plays into something. Now, So we're watching Ice Age with Elliot, and there's the little baby caveman, right? And we're like, Elliot, look, it's a baby, you know. And he's got a few words under his belt, but not many. But you know, he's learning language. Well, while we're doing this, and after I'd made dinner and we'd all eaten and I'd cleaned up, bam, massive smack on the wall of the cabin. This cabin, to give you an image, it's in the forest, but all the trees have been cut away at least 20 feet away from the cabin. So not only could a branch not fall on the house, even if it did, and it couldn't, but if it were, it would overhang and fall on the roof. But there was nothing to even fall on the roof. And this thing, there was just a smack on the cabin. And even Stacy, who is not near as much of a chicken as I am, she was like, what was that? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know at all. And it happened like 3 more times. I got to where at this point I was scared to look through the sliding glass doors out onto the porch with the barbecue. I was afraid I was going to see something on the porch. But part of me wanted to go out there. I now know that if I went out there, I probably wouldn't have seen anything. I've learned enough about that. But I'll be honest with you, it was scaring me. I was like, oh, what have I invoked? You know?
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that happened for the remainder of our trip every night. So here's the thing. Douglas has to go out for his nightly pee, right? Well, I take him out. I've got him on the leash. I'm going to take him on a walk. As soon as I get out the door and onto the front porch, he won't go anywhere. This dog has never done this. And not only will he not go anywhere, and I'm like tugging him, he's looking at me with this puppy dog like, please, Daddy, don't make me do this. And I'm thinking to myself, you have got to pee. I don't want you wetting in the damn cabin. I get him out 30 feet from the cabin. I'm just dragging him out there. I feel bad because it's like he's pulling and choking. I'm like, Douglas, don't make me try. I just want you to pee. Well, he just insisted he never peed at night. Every time I'd try, I had to give in and get him back in the house. He was picking up on something. So the next day, we all as a family went out for a walk. And I told you the house is on a cul-de-sac. I decided to make a glyph on the cul-de-sac the day before. And I'm just using creativity. I'm not trying to interpret what Bigfoot thinks I need to make or anything. Stacy got in on it, and she's adding stuff to it. And so we leave that there, and we go out, we go walking, and we go down a road that goes down to an area where, once again, another switchback. And it was an area where somebody was clearly going to build a house. There was these massive iron gates. But when you went in down the road, you could see this place was leveled years ago and nothing had happened. Like the trees were gone, but everything had grown up. And this was the same general area where I heard the big wood knocks coming up at me. So we go in there. I've got Elliot strapped on my back and like this baby carrier. And we're looking around, and I'm trying to see what I can see. And, of course, you know where my mind is. We eventually turned around, and all of a sudden, Elliot points up the mountainside into the woods, and he goes, baby. And I'm like, what do you mean, baby? And he said, baby. And I'm like, and the night before was when we watched the – I'll always say I might be putting things together and linking things that aren't real. I have to express that, but I'm just giving my idea of my mind. He's looking into the trees and he's saying baby. And the night before we were pointing at the caveman baby and going baby. And I try to go, Elliot, are you saying you're seeing a baby? What are you seeing up there? And he just would smile and say baby and point, and he never did anything else. So I'd looked up there and I couldn't see diddly, which I've now come to realize also doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think about the open-mindedness of a child. So I don't know if I sent you the picture of the drag marks, and we can discuss that when you pull it. So that was on that jaunt, leaving that part that we came across the drag marks. We went back up to the cabin. But here's the thing. As we got to the cul-de-sac, within an hour's time after I walked, that glyph was different. And it now looked like something that, I'm not kidding you, and I'm not saying that's what ever did it intended, it looked like the pi symbol. So at this point, I'm just overwhelmed and excited, though. I'm enthused. I'm like, this is awesome. This is cool. I am terrified about the slapping on the walls at night, though. So we get back to the house. And once again at night, I'm dealing with Douglas. So anyway, eventually the vacation wraps up. And I was grilling every night. I love grilling. Grilling is I love cooking, period, as you know. But if there's a grill, I'm going to leave the burner alone except for the green beans or whatever. And I'm going to be grilling. So I was out on the grill that last night and came in. We went to bed. The next morning when we were getting ready, I couldn't find my phone. And then I remembered I left it out by the grill. Well, I went out there and the phone was gone. Ooh. And I thought, well, surely I misplaced it. I looked on the grass below the porch. I looked all over the porch. We obviously scoured the house inside and out in case I was. But not only was the phone gone, the grill brush was gone. And the grill brush was so nasty, I would have never brought it inside. I always remember thinking they need to get a new grill brush. This thing's just cake with gone. The grill brush and the phone were gone. I don't know how to make sense of that. But that was the extent of that trip. And really at that point had me sold that there was a truth in here, that my sighting originally was buttressed by these experiences I was having, including the ones in 2014, which I have bypassed at this point just for, for the sake of keeping things timely. As a matter of fact, you've got some videos and we go over those. Those are actually from the 2014 trip.
Let me ask you this before you go too far.
What's that?
Was your phone a smartphone?
It was LG. I brought an iPhone up with me, but at that time the iPhone was only for musical ideas only. I had nothing in that phone. I was like, I brought my guitar. If I had a musical idea, I could scratch it down on the iPhone.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing about all this is when I got back home, and we had no reception up there. If we wanted to go and get text messages from people, we had to go up the mountain and back onto Highway 52. Down there was no reception. But when I got back home, the photos and the videos that were in that LG were in this computer that I'm talking to you on now. Can you tell me technically how that could happen? I didn't send them there. I've never been able to figure that out.
Wow.
I looked at my iPhone. I thought, well, maybe I'm mistaken. A lot of this stuff, I then started using the iPhone. But remember, this was the last day when I realized the phone was lost. And when I looked at my iPhone and went back to the pictures, they start with the 2 days after we got back home. That's all there are. And this computer has videos and pictures from up there. And I think I may even sent some of those to you. I don't know. I just ran. I was like, let me just fire this off. I didn't want to overload you.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. We've got a video, and it is, this first one is of a tree structure, and we will just play it and let you narrate over the top of it.
Okay. Will it keep looping or? So we had gone. So this was my first visit to Wilderness View Cabins off 52. And the last day we were there, we were going to spend one more day and night. We decided to drive up to Lake Conasuega, I think it is. That's Cohotterness Wilderness. It was like 14 miles up the mountain to Lake Conasuega, but because of the conditions on the road up there, it took a long time to get up there. There's very little in the way of guardrails and a lot of dirt and gravel, and it's slow going. You don't want to be moving too quickly up that mountainside. So we finally got to the lake. The lake is a really small lake, and it's apparently good fishing up there, and there were a lot of people camped out around the lake. So we parked in the parking area, kind of cruised around the lake just to get a lay of the lake. And then we found there was mountain trails that went off the lake and above the lake, up the mountain. So we went up there and I was filming, and I did find another set of tracks in a muddy bank by the lake that I didn't send to y'all, only because they were a little more ambiguous. I didn't think they were boots, but I wasn't sure. And I don't, I try to stay, I realize my desire to have this be a real thing has to be kept in check, even though I'm pretty much 100% there now.
Yeah.
But as far as evidence, if the evidence could be something else, you don't want to be pushing everything. The trees with the million circles, this is a face. And so I'm going up the mountainside, and all of a sudden I just look up above me about 50 feet or so, 40 feet off the trail, and there's just all these branches. And now I'd never seen a stick structure at this point. I knew about them. I'd heard about them. And I'm like, oh my God, look at that. And it's not like, it's a fairly steep grade up to that area where they are. A human could do it because I did it. I walked up there. But my question was, why would a human do this? Why would a human walk off trail, go up 40 or 50 feet, and then take these sticks? And one of them was broken, as you can see, into the tree, the main tree. But it was just, the rest of them were branches of trees and stuff that were not, and I was still learning. I don't call myself a researcher. I call myself an enthusiast. I was still learning. These things that are here, they were not, I should have gone around and shown you all that I looked at and filmed it. I've learned that since. There were no root balls in this stuff. These things had been laid where they were. And it was clearly to me something that was not a matter of branches doing this by chance. Now, I couldn't make any sense of it. And as much as I wanted to go beyond this tree structure, because the path is below this, okay, and that's beyond going further. And I couldn't leave my dog and my wife and go do that. And but I was amazed. I was like, wow, this is the first time I've seen a convolution of branches that don't appear to be happenstance or random. So I filmed it twice. I didn't send you the other film because I didn't want to be redundant, but it probably came more from the left angle and film it over here. So that was that one pretty much. That just, one more little thing in addition to that trip. That was the trip where the triangle was left in the middle of the road. And then, we went on our way and kept going up the mountaintop. But I was thoroughly like, wow, that is just cool. That is just cool. Yeah. I don't know that branch obviously could have broken and fallen in on its own, but it was taken into account the rest of it. And I suspect now, knowing what I know, that branch was broken into it. Part of it. It is conjecture, I admit.
Okay, I kind of lost you. I don't know why, but my computer locked up, and I.
Oh, really? Can you hear me? Am I here?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully the people, I don't know.
No, it kept going. They heard everything you said. So
okay.
Me and you were still here, and Mark was gone for a short time.
Okay.
He was on one of those trips ahead, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this next video clip is you entitled Squatch Prints, and we'll play it and let you give us the background story on it.
Absolutely. So this is actually at Fort Mountain State Park. We came across this and I was like, whoa, like you can see toe prints right there in this. We know that's a bear footprint. I don't know if I'm pointing directly at it, but the footprint that's closest to the bottom and closest to the center, you can see toes. The footprint up towards the left, like, you know how shoes are shaped. Shoes are not shaped exactly like feet. They kind of are wide at the back, then they get narrow at the center, and they widen out, then they taper at the front. Look at this. This is this footprint is completely narrow at the back and gets wider at the front. My regret that I told y'all is that, look at that one right there. Oh my God. Is that I didn't focus on some of the other ones as much as I should have, like that one. I should have studied that one more. But these were fairly small foot tracks, mostly between probably 7 and 9 inches, maybe 10 inches long. They were clearly not the same feet doing them. So I had this idea that whatever was creating these, there was a group of them and they all looked different. I did a good search on foot tracks. The biggest thing I kept hearing was beaver. I looked up beaver foot tracks. That's not a beaver foot track. I could find nothing of a beaver foot track that matched that narrow track. There's my shoe for scale. As I said, that's probably somewhere between 8 and 9 inches. And I just got this idea of kids frolicking in the mud. And the funny thing is, this was not far at all. It was right by a lake. And it was also not far from a primitive campsite at all. Like, this would have been, like literally 50 feet from a primitive campsite. But once again, I've come to learn that doesn't mean anything. Like, they're as curious about us as we are about them. This, once again, I guess I can't offer as definitive proof, and I guess, parents might let their kids go running through the mud barefoot because they're kids. There's a couple of feet that look like they could be human, but these ones that are narrow at the back and just get wider at the front without any middle taper or any arch, I don't know. So I thought it was worth filming. And of course, I had my wife reading something from a plaque about rhododendrons or something at the beginning. And I'm having to go, hang on, honey. Don't talk. I'm trying to be a serious researcher right now. But I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, those are pretty awesome.
Yeah,
and,
that's not a flip-flop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know the shape of shoes. Those are not shoe shapes, whether they're tennis shoes, mountain boots. That's not that. And I kind of doubt that many parents would be letting their kids run around barefoot at Fort Mountain. Beautiful place, by the way. And if you want to see bears in Georgia, my God, they are there.
Yes, they are.
And the bears in the Appalachians are much bigger than the bears in southern Georgia. I mean, way bigger. Yeah, that's a really skinny print. But you have heard of narrow Sasquatch prints. I have too.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the adults, but I don't know. I just got the idea of kids frolicking and playing, but just not people kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a slideshow, and let me pull it up.
Okay.
And we will go through these pictures one at a time.
Sure.
And let you tell us about them.
Okay. Okay, that's also in Fort Mountain State Park. Now, once again, not being the best researcher at the time, or like I said, I still don't consider myself a researcher, but learning things, we came across this right off the trail. There was one, this one I believe here, the one that goes the furthest back to the left, did break off at the root there. The rest of these I checked out and were just snapped. As a matter of fact, one of these has a red blaze on it. It's hard to see in this picture, but it was off the trail with a blaze on it for people to recognize. These trees were all clumped together, and only the one came from where it fell. But I was not very educated in how thorough you need to be to show people that kind of thing at that point. But those are large, fairly large pine trees. Obviously, no human being could pick them up. And it wasn't like a thing where I think the people working in the state park they saw everything that's going around the trail and they leave the rest. These things were moved and just kind of over each other. It's ambiguous once again, but to me it was interesting that these trees were broken at the bottom with no root ball. And I'm sorry that I didn't show that. You have to trust me on that one or not. That's up to the viewer,
Okay, we'll pull this next one up.
Okay, that's the glyph at the road. That's one of the changes of the glyph. So originally I had done this, and somehow this came into being that we didn't put it all. This little Y thing with that, and that thing there was added as well. This isn't the one that looked like the pi symbol, but that's the same glyph. And this is one of the ones that's in the computer somehow, even though the phone that it was taken on never came back to Savannah with me. But that's the cul-de-sac road. The cabin would be back this way. So that's one of those. This thing was added. We did not put that there. I mean, it could be a branch fell with a Y and then crossed at the top. And this little thing was added, you know. But it changed daily. That thing changed daily while we were there. The amazing thing to me was that it changed just within an hour in daylight while we were down there dealing with whatever we were dealing with, Elliot and the babies.
It's interesting that it changed daily.
Yeah. It seemed very playful. Okay, this is totally different. This is in 12 Mile Swamp in Florida. In 2015, I had to take a job offer to live in St. Augustine. It was more money than I could turn down. So I was living down there in a house and working 6 days a week. And the 1 day a week Sunday, and this will play into the other story. I hope we have time I can tell you. I don't know how limited we are in time. But St. Augustine also plays into the story I wanted to tell you about another situation that I brought up earlier. But this was in 12 Mile Swamp, which was northeast of St. Augustine, a few miles. And to me, it's a clear track. It's an old track. You see you've got a plant growing through here, but it's flat-footed. It's old enough to where if it were a boot track, yes, the rain would have washed out the tread. But once again, to me, the most interesting feature of this track, and this was close to an inch deep, the most interesting feature is once again, just getting bigger as it goes to the front and coming back more narrow. If you look at your feet, if you stick your foot in the mud or in the sand at the beach, it does not make an impression like that. So I thought that was worth getting a picture of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are Bigfoot reportings in 12 Mile Swamp. There is a BFRO report down there as well. So that's that one. Okay, once again, we're back up to the cabin at Fort Mountain where Elliot had just stated baby while pointing at the woods. Now, you can't tell in this picture, but there are bees flying everywhere. This is a underground bee hive. This gray muddy stuff is actually nectar. I've never seen nectar that looked like that. We had clearly, because the bees were still so stirred up, had just come upon something that was going for this nectar. The reason it's interesting to me is, and you see each line and the distance between each line, those are way, once again, not being the best researcher at the time, those are way wider than my fingers. And as you know, bear claws do not retract. There are no claw indentations into this, as if a hand pulled away and got the heck out of Dodge before we got there. Meanwhile, I'm trying not to get stung by bees that are flying. There's a bunch, if you look into the nectar, there's a bunch of dead bees in there too, if you can look real close. Mm-hmm. But there are no claw marks. Bears cannot retract their claws. They will create. This to me looks much more like fingers that for some reason was pulling backwards. And that was literally moments after Elliot said, baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Miss Joni's Garden just put a comment on here, and I think it's interesting, and it could explain what happened. It says, I've got an LG phone, and if I hit sync, Google takes my picture to the cloud, and I can pull them up on my computer as a file. And
somebody is pushing buttons. Well, think about it. We know that they like, I mean, I say this, I should never say we know, right? That's pompous of me to say that. But in my view, and I think probably a lot of y'all's views, these things are as curious of us as we are of them. They got to be curious about a gadget like a cell phone. I've even heard they're obsessed with the color blue, with blue mylar balloons that show up constantly at tree structures. I haven't found that yet, but I'm waiting. And I'm going to bring blue stuff out to one of my research areas here in Savannah. I just keep not getting to it. They got to be curious about us. Why would they not be? You know, we are of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, and it, you know, I had a full charge on it the night before. They might have had a little fun before it. And thank you for that comment. By the way, I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I can't see any comments. That's why I'm not responding to anybody. I've got this thing that says private chats and comments. Yeah. Oh, now I see the comments.
After all, turn them off. Put it back on private.
Yeah, because it's going to distract me, right? But you guys, I appreciate whatever your comments are, and perhaps later I can review them. I do appreciate that, and it's cool to get some of them. Okay, now look, this is one of the things I wanted to get to. This was a month and a half ago, up in Saluda, North Carolina, at a cabin that a friend of mine owns. I've been there 3 times. Every time I go there, I have interactions, including tree knocks. This is where I got my first rock thrown at me. This is up the mountain from her cabin, about 200 or 300, probably 300 yards, actually. It's up a little dirt road where there is a cleared out area, like as if somebody wanted to build a cabin, but it's never happened. This was one of my gut feelings, this area. And this is where I got the audio recordings on my new field recorder. As a matter of fact, if you look at that triangle and just imagine a tree hanging over it and about 6 feet above it, a little sewn bag with a field recorder in it, that's what was going on. So the cabin owner, my friend Christina, I'll give her first name, another great friend of hers that's now become a great friend of mine named Marcel, and Stacy, my wife, and Elliot. We all went up together. Elliot got into creating this glyph with me, and so did Marcel. So I made the triangle. Elliot made the little X up in the top corner and put the 3 acorns there. If you look closely, there's an acorn face up, and the top section of the X is one sideways, and in the other side is one down. This is very important. There's a line, an underscore under the X. And then below the X, you see what looks like a T. I put that rock there. I think Marcel put the leaves, including that orange leaf at the bottom, below the bottom line. Now, granted, I know the leaves, for the most part, could, wind could account for that. But if you look at the other picture, the part of the X that's going from top left to bottom right has been pushed down more towards the side, because you can see the acorn is now not in the nook, the right side acorn. And you can now see what was a T hanging off the top rock is an X with the little tail on the bottom. Now, a detail you're not going to see in these pictures unless you blew them up is there's a red leaf at the top right angle of that X that was actually under the big rock. It is now laying under the bar. So I've had this many times when I do glyphs. This was a windless night when we laid this up here. Very subtle changes, nothing overt. People freaked out when they saw the rock, said, look, it's been turned. I'm like, no, that's not true. Where I picked the rock up, it was on the bottom side, was dark and wet. It had just dried overnight, and that's why it looks paler. But these changes in these little things up in the top, to me, move a little bit past chance. And like I said, I stayed up a good bit of the night at the cabin to check the wind, and the wind was not there. There was no wind. So this, along with the recordings that unfortunately I don't have for you on that field recorder, which are, some of them just blew my mind, buttress that this thing was tampered with. So there's that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I see Hannah has made a comment. I have to wait for it to pull up on this other screen. And she says, what's the theory on why Sasquatch wants to make the pictures with sticks? Is it to communicate with others? Mark territory? Why would they do that?
Well, to the
And
first two questions, I think obviously both of those questions could be right. It could be to communicate, and it could be to mark territory, depending on the structure. I think they're probably creative beings, and they're like us, and this is their way in the forest to create. Now, I think there's probably a lot more going on than I'm just painting a really broad stroke. And it's always interesting because when we go to tree knock and when we go to make structure glyphs, we don't know what we're communicating. I admit that's a little haphazard, but how else are we to start some kind of dialogue with these things? And I don't know. My honest answer is I don't know. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I just come up empty. I don't know. I don't have any clue. But it is fascinating, and they clearly do use sticks and trees. It's a major part of their I don't want to say of their being, but just of their expression.
Yeah. I tell you, if anybody out there has done any experiments, why don't you put in the comment section after the podcast what you have, any conclusions that you might have came up with.
Exactly. So this is more close up, so you can see the difference. See, with actually the one on the right is the original construction. So you can see in the other one, but the interesting thing is the acorns weren't affected. You got one face up, one on its side, and one still face down, even though this top left, bottom right part of the X has been moved down closer to the side of the triangle. Because that one on the right is now no longer in the nook of that little part of the structure. And now you can see the red leaf. Okay, here's the red leaf on the top of the rock on the one on the right. Now it's over here under the X. It's under it. And the T that has been turned into an X with a tail on it. I just find that fascinating and just does not jive with me that wind did that, especially since there wasn't any wind. I mean, even my microphone, my audio recorder verified that. The only sounds of the night were all the weird sounds, the crickets, and a light sound of a nearby brook. There was no wind. I didn't even need a dead cat on the microphone to block the wind.
Wow, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this one, you're going to tell us the backstory on it,
my
because
God, I got more backstory for you now, because it happened again tonight.
Oh,
today. Okay, so the bottom line is I took a shower, and this is the outside of the shower, the picture you're looking at. Okay, I first discovered this image when I was inside the shower. There have been excuse me. There had been some weird things that had occurred the night before. One thing, and once again, I'm storytelling. Please remember that. I'm piecing together things that may be totally unrelated, but I'm just doing only what my mind tends to do. So going back to where the pyramid shape we just looked at the cabin, when we went up camping, up into the cabin with my friend, I had brought a shoulder bag that I've got with all my notebooks and stuff in it. And I had forgot that I had a revolver in it that was loaded. And I was nervous about that being in the cabin with Elliot around. So I was going to unload the bullets from the revolver. This sounds bizarre, but just follow this line of thinking with me. I couldn't get the cylinder out. There was a mechanism somehow in the bag that had rusted. I don't know if the bag was really humid. And even with WD-40 and 3-in-1, I couldn't get the lever to push to dislodge the cylinder. I could not get it out. And it was loaded with 6 bullets. So it was my decision, because I didn't want this thing hanging around with my son around. I just went outside the cabin and I went down a little hill and I just fired into the ground, just to fire off the chambers and just basically disarm the gun. I didn't think about any of this at all at the time. And this is going to sound really weird, but I've got some friends like Michael Peterson that I've recently met. I know a lot of people think he's very controversial, but I've had other people tell me that once you make contact with these things, they can find you. So because I don't know anything, I'm a novice, really. I consider everything everybody says is possibly true. When I was back here in Savannah and I was grilling out, I thought about that gun incident. I thought about how aggressive that might sound if something were living right up there a couple hundred yards away or hanging out. So I started talking to the woods outside my house. I said, I just want you to know, I fired that gun for my son's safety. And I said, and if that's okay, I want you to give me a wood knock. This is where the weird stuff happens. And I had that up at the mountains in that cabin, my friend's cabin. And I said, if you can tell me that that's okay and you understand, give me a 1 wood knock. If it's not okay, give me 2. I'm sitting here grilling again. And all of a sudden, I've never had a wood knock out here where I live, ever. The loudest wood knock I ever heard occurred it wasn't right away. It was 5 minutes later. But it happened. And it was in my neighbor's wooded area next door. So I didn't say anything about the wood knock to my wife or my son or any of that stuff. About 2 hours later, my son goes to the bathroom. He's getting ready for bed, and the window's open that opens up to that same side of the yard where my neighbors are. And he came running to me going, and now, Elliot's 6 now. He's not the little kid that said baby when he was 2. He's like, Daddy, I just heard a wood knock outside the window. I said, you did? Okay. I never know whether, he's a storyteller for sure. And he mixes fact and fantasy, so you never know where he's going. But I thought about it because I hadn't mentioned it to him. So then we go to bed. 3 in the morning, I get up to go to the bathroom. I get in the bathroom, I turn on the light. The light goes off. The power goes out. It goes back on, out, on, out, on. All in the span of 30 seconds, that many times. Now, I normally in Verneberg, where I live, this is like the country and the city. And we have a lot of rotten oak trees and stuff that's always coming down on, knocking out power lines. So normally I don't think anything about it, but I just had a weird feeling about it. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know if there's any connection to these things that you see on the screen. But the next day I got up and I got a shower. And as I'm in the shower, I start noticing this thing that the steam is revealing in the shower. And that is the most bizarre thing I have ever seen. Now, to give you some backstory, occasionally when if I'm showering and Elliot runs in, I'll draw a big smiley face with my finger. Just a big, primitive, goofy face because he loves it. I don't do this. See that the top of the head looks like there's either a back and forth or a little bit like brush strokes. I just do a lone finger stroke and that's it. I hadn't done that in weeks. The shower door has been cleaned multiple times since then with squeegees and all that stuff. So I go outside the shower into the bathroom where I can see it even better, and I take a picture of it. Now, this image on the right you see is many weeks later after it has been scrubbed many times on the inside. Now, to give you further information, I have since drawn my own goofy face over this thing, and that didn't need any scrubbing. The next time I took a shower, the goofy face was not there at all. Well, today, when I took a shower, not tonight, but middle of the day, I scrubbed the whole face out with a washcloth, and it disappeared. But by the time I got out of the shower, the face was back. Now, I'm not saying this has anything to do with Bigfoot, and I don't know where y'all go with Bigfoot and the paranormal, or if you just keep it to an animal. And because I'm open. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. But this is freaky. And what I can tell you is my wife absolutely said, no, I did not do that. And my son doesn't have the artistic ability to articulate that. And I didn't do it. And that's all there is to it. And it keeps defying scrubbing. It keeps coming back. I've got a picture of it from today.
And you said the lights went off in the bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, about 4 times off and on in a span of about 30 seconds. That may be totally unrelated. I don't know. Usually if the lights go out 2 times in a row, they're out for hours. And we have to call Georgia Power, and they say, well, the next 4 hours I'll be on. But this went off and on like 4 times.
I don't know. I'm no paranormal expert, but he took the picture down. But if you look at the top left of it, you got the 3 streaks going across there.
Yes. Yeah.
They always claim that that's demonic.
Really? Oh, hell.
Yeah.
That's not good. Do y'all know that guy's story? The guy from Florida, the part of the duo?
Yeah. Mark Martin.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That freaked me out. It really did.
Yeah.
My thing is, and this touches on something for me. I have to get back to the fact that so much of my experience with, and I'm going to lump in Bigfoot in the paranormal, even if it just means that it's outside of the normal. Doesn't mean it's mystical. It may, but it's outside of what's accepted, and that's what I mean. I came to it from a place of fear. And one time when Stacey and I were up in the mountains, the time where that I didn't talk about much, but showed you the triangle that was on the road the first morning I got up. One night we were there, and we were outside with a fire going and toasting marshmallows, and Stacey had to go to the bathroom. And the woods were right across from the fire where I was, and I got overwhelmed. This may be just me and my fear. That's what I'm saying. But I was even wondering if I was being zapped, that thing people talk about. But I was so overwhelmed with this confusing fear, and that I was like, it's like the least manly thing in the world. I'm like, if my wife does not get out here now, I'm going in the house. Like, I was consumed with this idea that I was being watched from the woods across the dirt road. I don't know what to make of that. But my bigger point is, I did approach this thing from a point of fear. And I don't look, even if these things, let's say they're human, and that's where a lot of people go with this, and let's say they are human. And maybe they're more enlightened than us in their higher states of being. If that's true, they are human, and certainly got to be accepted as possible that some have some intentions and some have others. And that's where I am. I don't want to buy into all the fear mongering. And we talked about the LBL area and how there's all these monster stories. And I know there's a whole contingent of researchers that just want to turn all these things into beasts because it sells, right? Fear, porn, it all sells. That being said, I don't know that, or even if they have their own set of rules and laws and we don't know them, and when we break them, they go from benign to, hey, you're messing me up and I'm not happy about it. And I have a few of those stories from others, not personal stories from me. But do I have time to share my story from Florida?
Yes. Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. So let me do this real quick if I can. And I can. Look, I can be concise, I promise. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I had a twin brother, fraternal twin. We were as close as we could be. We were as opposite as we could be because we were not identical. And in every way, I shouldn't say in every way. Kim was actually intrigued by the paranormal just like I was. But he was this guy that grew up to be Mr. White picket fence, 2.5 kids, and a dog named Spot, respectable citizen, whereas I've always just been this kind of whatever I am, musician type that's not reliable, to be the good guy. Not the good guy. I'm not a bad guy, but just not the upstanding citizen facade thing. And I'm not putting down my brother for that. That's what he did. I was just the guy that like everybody's like, oh, that's Phillip and his conspiracy theories and his Bigfoot and all that stuff. I've always been that guy, And I was okay with that. And he would confide with me when he was alone with me, his interest in all this stuff, but he couldn't let anybody else know about it. So that being said, a series of tragic events occurred in 2015 that killed him. It was partially on him and partially on the hospital. And we're not going to go into any of that, except to say that it was tragic. It was heart. It just crushed my heart. Like it broke me. It was, I told you I was at that job that year in St. Augustine. I had to drive up to Savannah and come up here. He was in the hospital. He was, he was unconscious, and they made some mistakes in the hospital over the next week or so. And we had to end up making the decision to take him off, the plug. And it just broke me. It was the connection I had with him, even though we were so different, the connection, the emotional connection, the love was just palpable, and it really crushed me. And I had to go back to work. I spent 2 weeks up here to deal with this and to grieve with my family and to do the funeral and all that. But unfortunately, I couldn't. I would have stayed 5 weeks if I could, but I had to get back to work. And as I said, we only had Sundays off. So I actually came back on a Saturday, and so I didn't get there in time to work on Saturday. So the next day I was like, well, do I need to stay in this apartment, or should I get back out like I did most Sundays and go out into my research areas? The Tonza State Park, and there was another wildlife management area off the St. Johns River, which is the one I frequented the most. And I thought to myself, I don't want to sit here and get with my thoughts right now. I just can't do it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go into the woods and do what I do. And I went out there. I drove. It's about a 30-minute drive to the one that's off of the St. Johns. And I got to walking, and I'm walking and headed back west towards the St. Johns through this pine forest on a little trail. And my grief just overtook me. It completely overtook me. I just started bawling. This was the first time I really let go. Back in Savannah, I was having to be the rock. I was having to be the one to keep everybody else together and comfort them and make the announcements about the funeral and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of keep it together. And honestly, it wasn't hard. I was not totally connected with my emotions at that point. When I say that it devastated me, that's not true. When we've had to pull the plug on him, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But up to that point and afterwards, even, I had to be the guy, one of them, not just me, but other family members had to kind of keep it together to do this thing. That's how we do somehow in this society. We feel like we have to keep it together. Maybe it's not healthy. I don't know. But so when I'm in the woods, I just broke down. And I'm just walking and I'm crying, and I'm just I've just become a ball of grief. That's all I am. I'm not even Phillip Polk Palmer anymore. I'm just a ball of grief. Sandra, thank you for that. That means a lot. It really does. It is still the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. So as I'm walking, even though I'm pretty well consumed in this, about, I guess, 40 to 50 feet in the wood line to my left, there's a bunch of commotion going on. And I look over and I can't see anything. It's really thick. It's pine forest with lots of undergrowth. This is in May. It's late May, maybe early June. Very hot. Very hot. Already. Even though it's not July in Florida, it is hot, right? And everything's green already. And so I can't see anything. I keep going. Eventually, I start kind of drying up. And I just keep walking, and I go towards the river. And I get to the river, and once again, it's St. John's. So just like the Okefenokee at the edge of the river, it's a little swampy looking. A lot of cypress trees, cypress knees, and there's this beautiful down log that I decided to sit on and just collect my thoughts. And I sat there for about 15 minutes, and then I just thought, there's not going to be any squatching today. I'm going to go back down that trail. I'm going to walk home, and I'm going to go home, and I'm just going to get with my thoughts. I have to deal with this. I have to accept this. And so I start walking back down the trail. And I mostly have my head down, just looking at the ground as I walk. I failed to mention, there is nobody there. There's a parking area where people have to come in. I'm not saying somebody couldn't come in from some other angle with this 9,000 acre or 7,000 acre place. But generally, the people that go in there go to the parking area. Even horse riders, they're bringing the trailers in, and they'll either trail or walk or bring the horses in. Nobody was there when I got there, and that was often the case. That was what was so beautiful about it. You just had the whole wilderness to yourself. And on the way back, I'm coming in, and right around the area where I had heard the commotion in the woods, which would have been to my left, which is now to my right, I'm mostly looking down, and I see this yellow flower, petal to petal, about that wide, and it had a green stem on it. And here are the details that are important to me. I don't know if you guys ever remember doing this, like as a kid, just pulling weeds. Or I used to play with plants as a kid and pretend they were soldiers and things and weird shit like that. And whenever I would break off a plant, like a weed, it would secrete this milky, almost Elmer's glue-like substance on it. I don't know what the chemical name is for that substance. But this flower with the stem had the white, milky substance on it, as if it had just been broken. And I looked around, and there were no other flowers like that anywhere to be found. And the flower was plump and full. The reason that's important is because, once again, the heat we were in, I knew it had to have just been plucked. And the only conclusion I could come to was, and by the time I got to the car with that flower, it was wilted. I thought about the asshole in me, excuse my French, if you got to bleep that out, please do. Thought, well, maybe I should document this, and take a picture of the flower now. But I just felt like that was disrespectful, because my immediate gut feeling was there was something watching me and could see my grief and was completely compassionate and empathetic for what I was going through, and had placed that flower for me to then find on the walk back. Once again, it's not conclusive. It's not proof of anything, but I said thank you. I walked and I went to the car. And by the time I got to the car, probably another 3/4 of a mile away, the flower was drooping and wilted. And like I said, there were none of those flowers in the walking space or even near the edge of the wood line. I guess it's possible there was once again, we use our rational mind. It's like it's possible there was a strong wind that was not anywhere else that came up and broke that flower and blew it onto the road. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I have heard similar stories, but really all I have to say is my sincere condolences. I cannot imagine what it would be like to lose a sibling, much less a twin.
Yeah, and it was the toughest thing. I will say this to add to that my brother was so unhappy in life that the way things went down, I feel like God gave him his pass. He had already tried to take his life many times. I'd been in the hospital with him many times. And these weren't fake attempts. They were just dumb attempts where he didn't succeed. And I think through a weird, dark comedy of errors through the hospital, God gave him his pass where he didn't have to take his own life, and he got out. And that's how I look at it, honestly. And I appreciate that. It means a lot to him. But, I know he's in a happier place now. He just was not built to stay here for whatever reason. So, but that to me, it was a clear, you get a feeling inside that you, once again, the gut, and you have to trust.
Uh-huh.
I can't say it was Sasquatch. I can't say that. It sounds comical to say it. But somehow that flower was there, and it was fresh, and it had that white Elmer's glue-like substance on it, and it was there. And I just, a lot of times I tell you, I talk to the forest. I'm literally talking to the forest, because I said earlier in this interview that Sasquatch, if somebody told me once, and it made a lot of sense, that we have developed technologically to dominate our surroundings, Sasquatch has developed to be their surroundings.
Yeah.
They are the ninjas of the forest. And it makes total sense to me. That's why so many people can't get their heads around it. Well, they are ultimately aware of us, you know. So anyway, that's what I wanted to get out more than even any of the pseudo evidence or whatever I might have, you know. It touched me more than anything else.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this past week, and you're such a nice guy, and I wish that there were more people of your caliber in this community. And
well, I take that as a highest compliment because I feel the same about. I get that from you already, and I get it from Larry, and I got that from remembering I've already seen you guys talk, and you have a good time with it. And you know, you take it seriously on the one hand because it's a passion, but you have fun with it, and that's so important. You know what I mean? Have fun with it.
Yeah,
it really is. I wouldn't be going into this if I wasn't having fun with it. Even if there's an element of fear. I mean, we go on roller coasters, right?
right.
I don't like falling.
I don't either. I got a fear of heights, Larry. I can tell you that right now. I do.
Well, Larry, do you have any final comments?
Well, Phillip, thank you for coming on. I enjoyed the Glyph thing. Is not anything that Mark and I have really been into, but we've heard a lot of people discuss it, and we are looking more into it in the past year anyway. It's something that happens, whether it's
we know the tree structures happen. You've seen the Colorado. I don't know what you make of Mark Abel. I don't. Once again, not the messenger, but the message. You've seen those tree structures in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
70-foot tree, totally green, ripped out of the ground, root ball up in the air against another tree. No tractors. I don't even see how physically they could do that. It blows my mind.
Yeah. And we have found similar things like that. And Larry, if you'll remember the glyph that we found at LBL up there by that pond.
Yeah.
And so we have ran across them ourselves.
Well, I would love it if you guys would stay in touch with me, and I would like to hear more about what it is y'all do. See, one of the things I haven't got much of is anything in the realm of vocalizations or that. I have I don't have that. And I know that y'all have a certain method you use, and I'd love to stay in dialogue with y'all and learn more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're on Facebook, Larry, but if you're not, you're smart.
I'm not smart.
Then please, if you will, find me and let's keep talking.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We had Mike's Adventure show us some love earlier, and we want to thank Mike. And next week, we will have a pre-recorded program because it's Christmas week. And we want to remind everybody, if you're interested in coming to the meet and eat, then you can message us on Facebook, or you can send us an email, and I will make sure that I put that in the comment sections. There's so many people that are coming, and they're flying from coast to coast, really, all the way in. From the West Coast, from Florida, and not to mention, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri.
Is anybody from Tennessee going?
Me and you.
Shelly's not going?
Yeah, Shelly's coming. But we want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I just feel like I'm leaving this on a low note after hearing you lose
I
your
didn't mean it.
twin.
Look,
Don't please don't apologize.
Well, I gotta stress, I didn't mean it to be that way.
Yeah.
I have dealt with it. I have assimilated all that. It was more to describe this situation. That's why I didn't want to go into the deep details about it.
Yeah.
Please, people, look, it's 6 years on now. I still love my brother. I know he's in a better place. I am not, don't have that feeling. It's okay. I am good. Like, I'm enjoy to be here with you guys. It's just, it's the thing that happened at that wildlife management area that really blew my mind. And it could be, and I'll always say, look, my imagination, who knows? I might be putting together stories, you know? But no, I'm good. We don't want to leave on a melancholy note. Everything is good. The only thing that you got to worry about is your outro now. Please, God, don't be one of the darker Pink Floyd type things.
Okay. We want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We've ran just a little bit over, but we appreciate everybody. We consider everybody that is family. And we will see everyone again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers.
Night, night. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new Facebook members. Be sure to check out our pictures and videos of possible evidence. And if you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. If you would like to support Beast TV, check out our gear. We have coffee mugs, face masks, gaiters, shirts, and tank tops. The link is pinned at the top of the comment section. Everything is always marked down 20%. So come check out our junk.
This has been a Sawdust production.